Hey, I'm Kelly Hogan, and 17 years ago, I felt like garbage. I got frequent boils that sent me to my doctor, and I had to get them literally cut open and drained. I needed a nap every day after work. I struggled with anxiety, I had self-confidence issues, and I didn't feel good. I frequently had strep throat, UTIs, and I even had a patch of cellulitis on my right thigh that made it hard for me to even go up and down a few steps. And that was when I was in my 20s. But in 2004, when I was getting yet another boil lance, my doctor told me that I was inflamed and that all of these problems would just get worse if I didn't lose at least 100 pounds. And I cried because, well, first of all, that was just kind of mean. It felt really cruel to say. And I also cried because I told him I'd tried everything already. So when that doctor, Dr. Benjamin Dunlap, told me that sugar and carbohydrates were causing this inflammation, I definitely listened, but I was skeptical. He taught me that day what carbohydrates are, and he told me to eat nothing but meat, eggs, cheese, and very low carb vegetables for 1 year. He told me not to limit my calories, but he also said, don't eat anything else. And I don't care if it's your birthday. Oh my gosh, this man is serious. But that's what I did. I mostly ate meat, eggs, and dairy because honestly, those things taste way better than vegetables. And I almost wanted to prove to him that this whole idea was kind of crazy and that it wouldn't work. Eat meat, don't count calories, and I'm supposed to lose weight. But I went back to see him 1 year later, and I had lost 80 pounds in that year. And it turns out he was on to something. So for the next 5 years, for 5 total years, I followed his advice. I ate very few vegetables. I did include diet sodas and sugar-free Jello during that 5 years, but I mostly just ate meat. Um, I had a terrible sweet tooth for that entire 5 years, though. No joke. It was awful. But in 2009, that's 5 years later, I found the carnivore community, and they encouraged me to cut out all sweet tastes. And they said it would put a stop to my carb cravings. And it turns out if you don't eat anything sweet at all for a period of time, turns out for me, it wasn't that long. It took me about 3 days without anything sweet. Some people, it takes more like 30 days. But at that point, you no longer crave sweets. Who knew? For the next 12 and a half years, I ate nothing but meat, eggs, and a little dairy. I did have some coffee, seasonings, and maybe a glass of bourbon a few times per year. But about 99.9% of my diet was literally just meat. For that 12 and a half years, I did not track anything. I didn't focus on macros or calories. I basically just ate burger patties. That's about it, for real. A lot of them were even fast food burger patties. They were 100% meat, and it worked for me. It was cheap, easy, and effective. I kept off that first 80 pounds, and then I lost another 40 pounds. I got my menstrual cycle back. It had been gone for about 2 years on hiatus. And then I had 3 babies, and I felt amazing on literally like the simplest version of a carnivore diet. During that time, I also began coaching people online. I was just so excited to talk about how my life had changed that I wanted to share it with people. And it started with helping folks on Facebook and in Instagram DMs. And then that turned into small group coaching via Zoom calls. Best job ever. I mean, for real. I get to watch other people get their health back by eating a meat-based or carnivore diet, and it's incredible. I hear stories of healing that blow my mind every single meeting. It's really cool. But during my coaching, I also found out that not everyone was getting the same results from carnivore that I did. What? But why? So, for example, some people didn't tolerate eggs well, and others couldn't go near dairy at all. So some people just needed to do a lion diet, and that's the diet that was made famous now thanks to Michaela Peterson. And she needed to literally just eat ruminant animals, no seasonings, no eggs, and no dairy in order to heal her arthritis, autoimmune issues, and depression. And I did find that some of my own coaching group members really needed to do that lion diet, especially for a while, just like Michaela, in order to get positive results. I did not have to go that route, but some people did. There were also some members who were feeling pretty great on a standard carnivore diet, but they just couldn't lose weight. So I just kept searching for answers of, but why? Why did they need to do something different than I did? It seems so unfair. Well, in July, I attended a meetup in New Jersey, and it was hosted by my good carnivore friend, Dr. Lisa Wiedemann, who's been carnivore, I think, about 7 months longer than I have. She told me that even on a standard eat all the meat you want carnivore diet, she had put on a few pounds in the last several months and that her A1C was going up. So she had started experimenting with a high-fat version of a carnivore diet with moderate amounts of protein. And some of her own group members were there at the meetup and were sharing that they were getting positive results. So I thought, well, that's cool. I want to give that a shot just to see what happens. Okay, I started that high-fat carnivore diet on July 25th of this year. So technically my 5-month high-fat carniversary will not be until Christmas. But within a few days, I was feeling even better than I had felt before. I also lost a few pounds like immediately in the first week. And I was eating even more calories than I was before starting high fat. What is this magic? Well, around that same time, I heard of Dr. Annette Bosworth, and I took one of her courses, and I learned a lot about why some people just can't handle large amounts of protein at a time. And I started talking to some high-fat carnivores like Amber O'Hearn, Stephanie Person, who's done high-fat keto for 15 years, Dr. Elizabeth Bright, who is a huge fan of high-fat carnivore, and they all agreed that some people really just do better with less protein per sitting and more fat, especially people who have been insulin resistant for a really long time. So after listening and learning and feeling great myself and eating more fat, I decided I was going to continue to get at least 80% of my calories from fat each day. I put out a few YouTube videos on the topic. I started teaching it to my coaching members as just a possible solution if they were having problems. And here's what I've learned. There are some people that I've worked with that feel like eating a high-fat carnivore diet is like a godsend. Those people are mostly women who are over age 50 who could not lose a pound on a standard carnivore diet. I have group members who say that they have never felt so satiated, never lost weight so easily. They've never had so much energy as when they dropped their protein per sitting and added more fat. And frankly, there are some people who feel the total opposite and hated it. So this is no shocker, but it's not for everyone. But I am going to share what happened to me when I went from eating burger patties and steaks all day, every day, to eating meals that contained about 25 grams of protein per meal and about 50 grams of fat per meal. And by the way, that is not weighted grams. You can't use a scale to determine this. You have to literally look at the nutritional label or a nutritional calculator online like Chronometer or Carb Manager or something like that. You don't need a food scale to figure out protein. You can't use that. Just saying. So by eating that way, I did notice some positive changes in my skin. I'm going to show you a before and after photo of my face without makeup. My skin just got clearer, and I feel like my features even look less old. For my first 10 days, of eating a high-fat carnivore diet, I just simply felt amazing. I had zero issues. And I was convinced in that 10 days that this was the way I was going to eat forever. No going back. I just felt more energetic on my hikes. I was sleeping like the dead. My skin looked good, lost several pounds, and I was full and satisfied. This was it for me. And then I went to another carnivore meetup and I caught COVID. So I wasn't all that sick with it, but I had a terrible headache. Like, oh my gosh, I never get headaches, but it felt like my head was going to explode every time I even slightly tilted forward. So much pressure. It just would not go away. I also had a stuffy nose and I could not sleep. I mean, I'm an amazing sleeper, but I couldn't sleep more than 30 minutes at a time per night. It was awful. The headache and the sleep issues, they each lasted about 8 weeks. Not fun. But I remained on the high-fat carnivore diet throughout those 8 weeks, and then I slowly started to feel better. I've been insanely consistent, keeping my calories at least 80% from fat every single day, checking glucose and ketones every single day. I tracked my food during this time for the first time in many years, and I found that I was eating well over 2,000 calories per day, sometimes closer to 3,000 per day, and I was not gaining weight. It was wild. So I went and had my lab work done after 3 months of eating pretty much nothing but fat trimmings, pork belly, butter, tallow, lard, and tiny steaks. I had no idea what all of that fat was going to do to my cholesterol numbers, and I didn't really care, but I was curious. And it turns out they were actually quite low. I don't necessarily think it's a great thing to have lower cholesterol numbers. The benefit to that is I have a new doctor, and he was very impressed and told me to keep up the good work. Now, don't worry, Dr. Dunlap, he is still alive, but he is long retired, and I live in a whole different part of the state, so hence the new doctor. But the new doctor was very happy with me. Okay, so I got my lab work back. Here we go. Total cholesterol, 146. 146. My numbers are never that low. My total cholesterol on a standard carnivore diet is kind of all over the place, though. Sometimes it would be 210, other times 176, and my diet was the same. Whatever. I put very little stock in total cholesterol numbers. LDL was 74. Same for LDL. Sometimes my LDL numbers through the years would go over 100, which is where they go, oh my gosh, now you have high LDL. And then this time, 74. My HDL stayed almost exactly the same as it always has, 59. I've always said my HDL runs about 60. Always true for my entire time as a carnivore. And my triglycerides, 53, which is almost exactly the same as most every time I've had triglycerides checked. I will tell you that there was a time when I tried leaner carnivore diet and my triglycerides went up. So regarding cholesterol, most doctors would look at those numbers and say, wow, that's perfect. As a carnivore, I mostly care that my HDL is still high and my triglycerides are still low. Awesome. To me, total cholesterol being so sporadic and LDL being so sporadic, even on the exact same diet through the years, has led me to think, does it matter? Also, I've had a CAC, a coronary artery calcium scan done, and my score is 0. So it is what it is. My fasting glucose that day at the doctor's office was 75. My fasting insulin was the lowest it has ever been, which was 1.5, and my A1C 4.7, which is also lower than it was on a standard carnivore diet. I think the highest it ever got was a 5.2, which is still pretty great. Okay, in addition to cholesterol changes, I want to go over some of the pros and the cons of my nearly 5-month high-fat experiment. All right, let's start with the cons. I had upset stomach, diarrhea, and indigestion for about 3 weeks when I switched from standard to high-fat carnivore. And then I had a few days of mild constipation, which was completely unexpected, but that's what happened. Then my digestion just got better. I attribute this to a few things. First of all, just some time for my belly to adjust. I do think that matters. And maybe if I hadn't changed anything else, it would have just gotten better. Also, I started eating more fat trimmings and less butter. That did seem to help. I was having some acid reflux, and switching from butter to just fat from the butcher was helpful. I did try some lipase, which is just an enzyme that helps to break fat down so it's more easily absorbed. I think I only took it for about 10 days, and then I stopped, and things definitely seemed better. I have some coaching group members that say it really helped, and some say, it wasn't for them. Same for ox bile. I tried that for just a few days. I could tell no difference with ox bile, but maybe it takes longer than that. But anyway, things worked out. Now my digestion is good without taking anything. I also have started really chewing my food very thoroughly and drinking less water with my meals. So I drink more throughout the day and less chugging while I'm eating, so it doesn't dilute all my stomach acids. Okay, another con was that I had to learn to be satisfied with smaller portions. I've always been a volume eater, so I just had to finally learn what true satiety felt like. Instead of just relying on a 1 to 2 pound steak or a big pile of burgers to make me feel full, it was a smaller plate of food, but with lots of fat. So it's plenty of calories. It just took a little while for me to realize that, yeah, you are full. It's a different kind of full. I had to eat slower and just give my brain time to acknowledge you're satisfied. That was enough. And the only other downside that I can think of is that I've bought quite a few test strips there, and those can get kind of expensive. So I was testing every single morning when I woke up. It only took about 2 minutes to check. It's not hard, but it's also not necessary for everybody to do that. I found the data to be really interesting, and it kept me on track because I knew if I had a high protein meal or if I did have any alcohol at all, which I did not during the entire experiment, if I did anything different, I figured I would see it on that data the next day. But yeah, those strips can get pricey. Now for the pros. Number one, I have saved a lot of money on food eating this way. I can get fat trimmings for 97 cents per pound, and the stuff is so filling. I could eat a little tiny 4-ounce steak with a pile of these cheap fat trimmings, and I'm stuffed. So much cheaper than standard carnivore diet by somebody with a volume addiction issue. I did tell you that my skin improved immediately, but so did my energy. I also did lose the several pounds, but I had so much energy that I actually started going to a gym, and I have not done that in my entire 13 years as a total carnivore. So for the past couple of months now, I've been lifting weights, boom, in a CrossFit gym, which is really not what I expected CrossFit to be. It turns out it's just the one I go to is just a really supportive, fantastic class. I go to what they call the master's class for ages 40 and up. My muscles are looking more defined. And I did gain back about 3 pounds of the several that I lost. I think I lost 7 originally on high fat, and I gained back about 3. But the super fancy scale says that it's lean mass and not body fat. So I'll take those 3 pounds. Benefit number 3 is that prior to this experiment, I was having some unexplained lower back aches, as well as some breast tenderness. My kidney levels have always been perfect. I've never once had a single issue, and I've had them checked. But it was just this dull ache in my lower back that would just come and go occasionally, and it bothered me. I thought, what is that? But since starting High-Fat Carnivore for 5 months, it has been completely gone. I also have no more breast tenderness. Pretty cool, right? Okay, the last benefit I can think of right now is that I have learned a new tool that I can use with some of my coaching clients. So even though eating this high-fat version of a carnivore diet is not necessary or perfect for everybody, it really does seem to help some folks. And for people who are eating 1 to 2 meals per day with at least a pound of meat at each meal, and they were still getting high A1C numbers, they had low energy, they were holding on to all of that excess body fat, couldn't lose anything, simply spreading out their protein into smaller meals throughout the day and including more fat in their diet, it really has made a difference for many of them. And I would not have been able to fully empathize with them with the challenges of it and how to get started, how to do it on a day-to-day basis if I hadn't lived it for myself. So now the question is, am I going to continue eating this high amount of fat with more moderate amounts of protein? That is a great question. So going forward, I think I will always keep higher amounts of fat in my diet than I did prior to this experiment. I have truly learned that I do feel better eating more fat. And now that my gut has adjusted nicely, I actually have no reason to go back. What I don't think I will do forever is track to make sure that it's exactly 80% or higher for every single meal, because that's what I've been doing every meal. So I think if I have a large steak from time to time, especially if it's like right before CrossFit class or right afterwards, I'm good with that. If that lower backache were to come back, or if my chest feels sore again, or if any other issues arise, I know what to do. Back off of the protein, raise the fat. I do not think I'm going to continue tracking glucose and ketones forever. Certainly not every day. So maybe I just check in. If I were to eat some meals that were much higher in protein, let's say, and I wanted to just see how does my body handle it. I've spot checked that some lately, just doing a few days with higher protein, and glucose and ketones are still really like exactly where I would want them to be. I have definitely done enough research and have heard enough compelling evidence that I now strongly believe that being in ketosis at least occasionally or part of the time, even if it was, say, a couple days per week, is a really great thing when it comes to mitochondrial health and longevity and mental health and even staving off things like Alzheimer's. But I don't personally have a reason that I think I need to be in ketosis every moment of every day, though I do feel really good right now. So I also don't have any reason not to. So I guess the short answer is I'm probably going to keep things pretty much the same, but maybe not quite as strict as I did during this experiment. Like, it's okay if I have a bigger meal once in a while, but I want to keep feeling just this way. As for the question of should you try a high-fat carnivore diet, if you're still eating carbs and sugars or processed junk food, I would simply suggest that you dedicate every single bit of your effort to just getting off of those foods and simply eating a nutrient-dense diet that's full of healthy meats and animal products. Like the end, that I would call that job number one. For many people, including myself, that was the ticket right there. That was the main thing. That's what I needed. I did not have to check anything or measure or track. I literally just needed to get off of all those foods and eat meat. But if you have already tried doing that and you aren't feeling great or you aren't getting the results that you were hoping for, I do think that it might be helpful to figure out what your macros are now. What's a typical day of eating? And then figure out how much fat, protein, calories you're getting. I don't care what you're eating, what the diet is, whether it's plant-based, total carnivore, what it is. If you are under eating, you are probably going to feel bad. So I do think it is worth checking in once in a while just to make sure, are you getting enough food? Can you sleep through the night, at least for the most part? Do you have energy? Are you needing to nap every single day? Do you have dry, flaky skin? Oh, I did have some of that when I first went high fat. I forgot to mention that. My skin got dry for a while and then it got great. Okay. Is your hair falling out? It could just be you're not eating enough. So tracking your food for a few days of typical eating and then finding out what your caloric intake is can be helpful. It doesn't mean that you are tied to a macro calculator for the rest of your life. But if you do track your food for a few days and find, wow, I'm actually eating pretty low fat for a carnivore, it's more like, say, 60% calories of fat, then it may be worth trying to bump it up a little bit to see if you feel better. If you bumped it up to 65 to 70 calories from fat each day and you started to feel even better, then you might want to stay there or even try bumping it up just a little bit more. It doesn't have to be all in one day. Ta-da, now I'm a high-fat carnivore. That's how I roll all the time with everything. But that doesn't mean that's how other people have to do it. If you figure out your macros for a few days and you find out, wow, I'm eating more than 200 grams of fat per day, I'm getting more than 80% of my calories from fat. That is not the case for most people, unless they're trying. Then you may want to consider bumping that down a bit if it's not working for you. If it's working, fantastic. In fact, whatever you're doing, if you feel great and you're getting the results you wanted, I really would not mess with that. So I strongly believe that all of us need healthy fats. I strongly believe that all of us would feel better if we traded out carbs and junk food for healthy animal products. And I strongly believe that none of us thrive on a diet that has sugars, dyes, additives, seed oils, processed, starchy junk. Nobody does best on that. But other than that, I do think there is a lot of leeway for what works for people. I felt really good eating burger patties all day, every day. And I feel even better when I add some fat to that and eat less protein at a time. And I truly believe that if you are willing to experiment, if you are willing to experiment and just pay attention to your body's responses, that you will also find what works for you. If you already know which style of carnivore or meat-based diet suits you best, just comment below. There are no wrong answers. If you need help getting started with carb elimination or sugar addiction, or you want some help just making any changes in your life, I would love to work with you. I have groups, they're small groups, they are filled with curious and kind people, and we're all just working on improving our health and reaching our own goals. And everything is easier when you have a team. If you are willing, please hit the like button. Just make sure you're subscribed. This channel is approaching 100,000 subscribers. Honestly, my kids are thrilled about that because they think it would be so cool if their mom had a play button. If you like and share the video, it does ensure that more people will have access to this content. Okay, speaking of the kids, it is time for the school day to end. So I hope you guys have a great day. And don't forget, for heaven's sakes, eat the meat, eat the humans. Bye.